were supposed to protect her, decided they no longer wanted her. No screaming, no second chances, just a closed door in the middle of the night. She walked away with nothing but an old backpack and the clothes she was wearing. No money, no phone, no place to go. Rain began to fall as she reached the highway. Cars passed her like she didn't exist. And for a moment, she wondered if this was how her story ended. Then a motorcycle slowed behind her. A man everyone avoided. A man who didn't ask questions. A man who didn't offer promises. He stopped. And in that single decision, everything changed. This is not a story about revenge. It's not even a story about love. It's the story of what happens when someone chooses not to look away, and how one night in the rain can teach you how to survive. Emily Carter had learned at a very young age how to be quiet. Not the kind of quiet that came from shyness, but the kind that came from knowing your presence was tolerated, not welcomed. In the Carter household, silence was safer. Silence meant fewer questions. Silence meant fewer chances to be blamed for something she hadn't done. At 18, Emily still lived in the same house she had grown up in. A modest two-story home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. From the outside, it looked like any other family home. Clean lawn, white porch railing, warm lights behind the windows at night. Inside, it was different. Emily's mother had died when she was 13. Cancer. Long nights in hospitals. The slow kind of goodbye that never really ends. After that, the house never felt whole again. Her father tried at first. Or maybe he just tried not to fall apart. Within 2 years, he remarried. Linda moved in with her son, Ryan. From the beginning, Emily understood her place. She was not the priority. She was the reminder of a life her father had lost and didn't know how to face. Linda ran the house. Ryan filled the space. Emily stayed out of the way. She did her chores. She kept her grades up. She avoided conflict. She learned how to disappear without actually leaving. That night started like many others. Dinner had already ended. Plates were washed. The television hummed softly in the living room. Emily was in her room, sitting on the edge of her bed, reorganizing the same few items in her old backpack. She did this when she was nervous. It gave her hands something to do. She didn't know why she felt uneasy. Nothing had happened yet. But she had learned to trust that feeling. Trouble in that house never announced itself. It crept in quietly. Then she heard raised voices downstairs. Her name. Emily froze. She listened as footsteps moved across the living room. A drawer slammed shut. Another voice followed, sharp, accusing. Ryan's voice, confident, certain. Emily stood up slowly, her heart already sinking before she even knew why. When she walked downstairs, all three of them were there. Ryan stood near the kitchen counter, arms crossed. Linda was beside him, one hand resting on his shoulder in a way that looked protective but felt calculated. Her father stood across from them, his posture stiff, his face tight with frustration. On the table sat an open envelope. Empty. Emily recognized it immediately. It was the envelope where her father kept cash for household expenses. The air in the room felt heavy, like the moment before a storm breaks. Ryan spoke first. He didn't sound angry. He sounded disappointed. That was worse. He explained calmly that the money was gone, that he had checked everywhere, that Emily had been home all afternoon, that no one else had been upstairs. Linda didn't ask questions. She didn't hesitate. She simply nodded. as if the conclusion had already been reached long before the conversation started. Emily tried to speak. She said the words quickly, all at once, afraid that if she paused, she wouldn't be allowed to continue. She said she hadn't taken anything. She said she didn't even know the envelope existed. She said there had to be another explanation. Her voice shook. She hated that. Ryan looked away, shaking his head slightly, as if this was exactly the reaction he expected. Linda stepped in. She spoke softly, but every word landed like a verdict. She talked about responsibility, about patterns, about how Emily had always been distant, how she'd always seemed resentful since Linda and Ryan moved in, how this wasn't the first time something had gone missing. None of that was true. But truth didn't seem to matter. Emily turned to her father. He didn't meet her eyes at first. When he finally did, she barely recognized the man looking back at her. There was no anger there, just something colder. Disappointment mixed with exhaustion. As if she had become a problem he no longer had the energy to solve. She waited for him to say something, anything, to ask questions, to give her a chance. Instead, he said only one sentence. "I don't recognize you anymore." The words didn't sound loud. They didn't need to be. They landed with a finality that stole the breath from her lungs. In that moment, Emily understood something she had been afraid to admit for a long time. He had already chosen. What followed happened quickly. Her father told her to pack her things. Not tomorrow. Not after they talked it through. Now. He said it was time she learned consequences. He said maybe being away would teach her something. Emily didn't argue anymore. She went upstairs in silence. Her room was small, always had been. She didn't bother turning on the light. She packed mechanically, grabbing the same old backpack she had carried to school for years. A change of clothes, a hoodie, her wallet, empty. A few personal items she couldn't bring herself to leave behind. Her phone was gone, taken earlier that week over something trivial she could barely remember. By the time she came back downstairs, the house felt different, like she was already a stranger walking through it. Linda didn't look at her. Ryan avoided her eyes, though there was something like satisfaction flickering across his face. Her father stood by the door, keys in hand, as if he were waiting for this moment to be over. No one stopped her. No one said goodbye. The door opened. Cold air rushed in, carrying the quiet weight of the night. Emily stepped outside. She stood on the porch for half a second, waiting, without knowing what she was waiting for. A callback, a change of heart, a voice telling her this had gone too far. The door closed behind her. The lock clicked. That sound echoed louder than anything else. Emily looked down at the backpack hanging from her shoulder. It felt heavier than it should have. Or maybe that was just the realization settling in. She had no money. No car, no phone, nowhere to go. The house behind her stood still and silent. Lights glowing warmly inside, as if nothing had happened at all. Emily took one step away from it, then another. She didn't cry. Not yet. She walked down the driveway and into the dark street beyond, the weight of the night pressing in around her. Behind her, the door never opened again. And just like that, her family ended, not with a fight, not with screaming, but with a closed door and a decision that could never be taken back. Emily did not know how long she walked. Time lost its shape the moment she stepped off the driveway and onto the empty street. The neighborhood was quiet, almost unnaturally so, as if the world itself had decided not to interfere. Streetlights cast long shadows on the wet pavement, stretching her silhouette into something thin and fragile. She kept walking because stopping felt worse. The night air grew colder with every block. The clouds above had thickened, heavy and low, and when the rain finally began, it came without warning. Not a gentle drizzle, but a steady, unforgiving downpour that soaked through her hoodie within minutes. Emily pulled the straps of her backpack tighter against her shoulders. The fabric clung to her skin. Her shoes squelched with each step. She didn't cry. Her mind felt strangely empty, as if her thoughts had shut down to protect her from the weight of what had just happened. Every so often, the image of the front door closing flashed through her mind, the sound of the lock clicking, final and sharp. But she pushed it away and focused on the road ahead. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't go back. The quiet streets eventually gave way to the highway. Cars passed at a distance, their headlights streaking through the rain like brief flashes of another world. One that kept moving, indifferent to the girl walking alone on the shoulder. The rain intensified. Wind cut through her clothes, cold and relentless. Emily's hands trembled, numb from the chill. Her steps slowed as exhaustion crept into her muscles. Each breath felt heavier than the last. She tried to stay alert, but fear began to blur into fatigue. The road stretched endlessly ahead, dark and slick. The sound of tires against wet asphalt grew louder, closer. She stepped too far to the side without realizing it. A horn blared. Bright headlights flooded her vision. Emily froze. For a split second, her body refused to move, caught between panic and disbelief. The world narrowed to light and noise and rain pounding against her face. The car swerved at the last possible moment, missing her by inches. Wind and water rushed past as it sped away, leaving behind silence that felt even louder than before. Emily stumbled backward, her heart racing violently in her chest. She lost her footing and fell to her knees on the wet ground, palms scraping against the cold pavement. She stayed there, breathing hard, rain running down her face and into her eyes. That was when she heard it, the deep, unmistakable growl of a motorcycle engine slowing behind her. Tires screeched sharply as a heavy bike came to an abrupt stop. Emily turned slowly. A Harley-Davidson stood a few yards away, rain glistening off its dark frame. The rider remained seated for a moment, engine idling, helmet tilted slightly as if studying her. He dismounted with calm, deliberate movements. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black leather jacket worn smooth. With age, dark jeans, heavy boots planted firmly on the ground. Tattoos curled down his forearms, partially hidden beneath the sleeves. He removed his helmet, revealing short, dark hair damp from the rain and a face marked by sharp lines and quiet hardness. His eyes were dark, steady, and unreadable. He didn't rush toward her. He didn't ask questions. He simply looked at her, soaked, shaking, kneeling alone on the roadside at night. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and firm, carrying easily over the rain. "Get on. I'm not asking twice." That was all. No explanation, no concern wrapped in the soft words, just certainty. Emily hesitated for half a second. Then she stood. Her legs felt weak as she walked toward the bike. The man stepped aside without comment, handing her a spare helmet from the side compartment. His movements were efficient, practiced. She climbed onto the back of the motorcycle, her hands gripping the seat at first, unsure. When the bike lurched forward, she instinctively held onto his jacket, fingers clutching the leather as if it were the only solid thing left in the world. They rode through the rain in silence. The city lights faded behind them as they moved toward the outskirts of town. The road grew quieter, narrower. Trees lined the way, their branches bending in the wind. Emily rested her forehead against his back, exhaustion finally pulling her under. The steady vibration of the engine and the warmth radiating through the leather jacket grounded her in a way she hadn't realized she needed. She stayed awake just long enough to notice the bike slowing. A small house appeared through the rain. A single-story home with a light glowing in the front window. The yard was simple, but well kept. Wind chimes clinked softly near the porch. The motorcycle stopped. Emily slid off carefully, her legs stiff and unsteady. The man steadied the bike with one hand, watching as she walked toward the front door. She knocked once. The door opened, almost immediately. Margaret stood there, wrapped in a cardigan, her gray hair pulled back loosely. Her eyes widened when she saw Emily, drenched and pale. She didn't ask questions. She pulled her granddaughter inside. Emily barely made it past the living room before her strength gave out. She sank onto the sofa, her body heavy and unresponsive. Exhaustion finally claiming its victory. Within seconds, she was asleep. Breath slow and uneven, rainwater soaking into the cushions beneath her. Margaret gently removed Emily's wet shoes, draped a blanket over her, and brushed damp hair away from her face. Only then did she turn back toward the door. The biker still stood on the porch, helmet tucked under his arm. Margaret thanked him quietly. She invited him inside out of courtesy, but he remained near the doorway. She offered him coffee. He accepted with a nod. They spoke in low voices in the small kitchen, careful not to wake Emily. Margaret talked. She told him about Emily's mother, about the years after, about how the girl had learned to make herself small to survive, about how tonight her own father had closed the door on her. The man listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't react. His expression remained controlled, unreadable. But when Margaret mentioned the word alone, his fingers tightened slightly around the coffee cup. When she finished, silence filled the room. The biker set the cup down, untouched. He didn't say he understood. He didn't say he was sorry. He simply nodded once, pulled his jacket tighter, and stepped back into the rain. Margaret watched him leave, the sound of the motorcycle fading into the distance. On the road home, the rain softened to a steady rhythm against the helmet. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating miles of empty highway. As the bike moved forward, memories rose uninvited. A small boy sitting on a front step long ago. A house with no lights on. Birthdays that passed unnoticed. Nights where no one asked where he'd gone. The man riding the Harley didn't dwell on the memories. He never did. He rode through them the same way he had always ridden through everything else. Forward, steady, without looking back. Behind him, the road stretched on, wet and dark. Somewhere back there, a girl slept safely under a borrowed blanket. And though he would never say it, something in him had already decided that this night would not be forgotten. Emily woke up the next morning to the sound of birds outside the window. For a few seconds, she didn't know where she was. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar. The light was softer. The air smelled faintly of coffee and something warm, something safe. Then memory returned, slow and heavy. The door, the night, the rain. She sat up carefully on the sofa, the blanket slipping from her shoulders. Her clothes were dry now. Someone had changed them while she slept. A mug of water sat on the table nearby, untouched. Margaret was in the kitchen. She didn't rush Emily. She didn't press her with questions. She simply made breakfast and waited until Emily was ready to speak. When Emily finally did, the words came quietly, without drama, as if telling the story aloud made it less real. Margaret listened. She always did. That day marked the beginning of something new, not sudden, not miraculous, but steady. Emily stayed. She enrolled in a nearby school. She took a part-time job after classes. She learned how to move through the world again, one careful step at a time. Life with her grandmother was simple, quiet, predictable. And for the first time in years, Emily slept through the night. She did not see the biker again for a long time. Months passed. Winter arrived, cold and gray, then slowly gave way to spring. Emily grew used to the rhythm of her days. She learned which buses ran late, which streets felt safe, which corners of town still made her chest tighten for reasons she couldn't fully explain. She thought about that night less and less, until her birthday came. It was early evening when she heard the sound of a motorcycle outside the house. Not loud, not aggressive, familiar. Emily looked up from the kitchen table. Margaret paused as well. Through the window, she saw a dark shape by the curb. A man standing beside a bike, a small box in his hands. Emily stepped outside. Jack Reaper stood there exactly as she remembered him. Black jacket, calm posture, helmet under one arm. The rain was gone, replaced by cool autumn air. He held out the box without ceremony. Inside was a small cake, plain, chocolate, one candle. Happy birthday. That was all he said. Emily didn't know what to say in return. By the time she gathered herself, he was already turning away, swinging a leg over the motorcycle. She watched him leave, the sound of the engine fading down the street. She didn't chase him. She didn't call after him. She went back inside, stared at the cake for a long moment, then smiled in a way that surprised even herself. That became the pattern. Every year, on the same day, he came. Sometimes it was afternoon. Sometimes it was already dark. The cake was never the same, but it was always small, always simple, always just enough for one candle. He never stayed long. He never came inside. He never asked questions. One sentence, one gesture, then gone. Emily learned not to wait by the window. He arrived whether she was ready or not. She learned not to ask why. Some things felt too fragile to touch with words. Years passed. Emily grew older, stronger, more certain of herself. She graduated. She saved money. She planned a future that did not depend on anyone else's approval. Jack remained a constant that never demanded anything in return. He did not show up for holidays. He did not call. He did not interfere. He simply appeared once a year, marked the day, and disappeared again. Margaret noticed more than she said. She never asked Emily about him. She never asked Jack about his life. But she always made sure the porch light was on that night, even before Emily remembered why. Emily began to understand something subtle and profound. Jack was not trying to be part of her life. He was making sure she knew she hadn't been forgotten. That realization changed the way she saw him and herself. There were moments when Emily wondered what would happen if she asked him to stay, if she invited him in, if she asked questions about his past, his scars, the quiet weight he carried with him. But she didn't. She sensed that whatever bound them existed precisely because it asked for nothing. Jack, for his part, never allowed himself to linger. Each time he rode away, his posture was the same. Straight, controlled, as if stopping longer would break a rule he had made for himself long ago. On the road after each visit, the miles passed beneath him in familiar rhythm. The highway at night looked different than it had years ago. The world felt quieter now, less hostile. Or maybe he had simply learned how to move through it without expecting anything back. Every birthday reminded him of things he never spoke of. Years where no one remembered the date. Candles that were never lit. Doors that stayed closed. He didn't think of those memories with bitterness anymore. They were just facts. And facts, once accepted, lost their power to hurt. The bike carried him forward, rain or shine, through cities and towns that blurred together. He did not stop to wonder what would come next. He had learned long ago that staying was dangerous. Caring too openly invited loss. So he did what he knew how to do best. He showed up, and then he left. For Emily, those brief visits became something steady in a world that had once felt unstable. They reminded her that kindness did not always announce itself loudly, that some people expressed care through consistency rather than promises. She never tried to follow him. She never tried to hold on. She simply accepted the gift for what it was. A presence, a reminder, a quiet acknowledgement that the night she was thrown away had not erased her from the world. As the years passed, Emily stopped counting how long it had been since she left her father's house. That chapter of her life faded into something distant and closed. But every year, when the sound of a motorcycle approached, she remembered. Not the betrayal, not the pain, but the moment someone had stopped, and that was enough. Emily had learned to recognize the sound of Jack's motorcycle. It wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It was a low, steady presence that reached her ears just before she consciously noticed it. By the time she looked toward the window, she already knew who it was. It was her birthday again. The years had passed quietly. Emily was no longer the girl who had walked into the rain with nothing but a backpack. She had grown into herself, careful, independent, steady. Life with her grandmother had given her something she had never known before: consistency. The porch light was already on. Jack arrived as he always did. The same bike, the same calm movements, the same small box held out without ceremony. A cake, one candle. He said the same words he said every year. Emily smiled, thanked him softly, and stepped aside so he could place the box on the porch table. For a moment, everything felt familiar, predictable, safe. Then another car pulled up behind his motorcycle. Emily turned. She recognized it immediately. Her chest tightened. The car door opened, and Linda stepped out first. She looked older than Emily remembered, her hair streaked with gray she hadn't bothered to hide. Ryan followed, his posture stiff, his expression guarded. And behind them came her father's absence, heavy and unspoken. They did not look apologetic. They looked uncomfortable, calculating. Emily felt the past surge forward, uninvited and overwhelming. The driveway blurred, replaced by another night, another door, another moment where everything had ended. Jack did not move. He remained where he was, standing between Emily and the street without appearing to do so deliberately. His presence was subtle but unmistakable, like a line drawn quietly in the ground. Linda spoke first. Her voice was measured, formal, as if she were conducting business rather than addressing a girl she had once sent into the night. She explained why they were there. She spoke of arrangements, legal matters, documents that needed signatures. Emily heard the words, but they seemed to float past her. Then came the sentence that cut through everything else. Her father had died. The information settled slowly, like dust after something had shattered. Emily felt it not as pain at first, but as a hollow space opening somewhere deep inside her. A space she had learned to live with, but never fully accepted. She thought of the man he had been before everything went wrong. The quiet evenings, the way he used to check on her homework, the version of him that existed before silence replaced care. She also thought of the man who had stood by the door and told her he no longer recognized her. Both versions existed at once. Linda continued speaking. Insurance, property, formalities. They needed Emily's cooperation, her signature, her compliance. They did not ask how she was. They did not ask where she had been all these years. They did not say they were sorry. Emily felt her body tense, torn, between conflicting instincts. The part of her that still carried grief for a father she had lost long before his death, and the part of her that had worked too hard to rebuild her life, to let the past rewrite it again. Jack listened in silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, controlled, devoid of emotion. "You lost her the moment you closed the door." The words were not raised. They were not dramatic. They were stated as fact. The effect was immediate. Linda faltered. Ryan shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. For the first time since they arrived, the balance of control shifted away from them. Emily looked at Jack, surprised not by what he had said, but by the way he said it. Without anger, without threat. Just certainty. She realized then that he was not speaking for her. He was stating a truth they could no longer avoid. The conversation stalled. Awkward silence filled the space between them. Linda attempted to recover, returning to the subject of documents and timelines. But her confidence had cracked. Emily felt something change inside her. For years she had survived by staying quiet, by letting things pass, by believing that endurance was the same as strength. Standing there now, she understood that silence had protected her once, but it could not protect her anymore. She thought of her grandmother inside the house, unaware of the confrontation unfolding outside. She thought of the years she had rebuilt piece by piece, the work, the patience, the resolve it had taken to become whole again. And she thought of the girl she had been, standing on that porch years ago, waiting for someone to stop her from leaving. No one had. Emily stepped forward. Her voice was steady when she spoke. She did not raise it. She did not accuse. She stated what she would do and what she would not. She would not be manipulated. She would not be erased. She would not give away her rights simply because it was convenient for those who had abandoned her. She would take time. She would seek proper counsel. She would decide on her own terms. Linda tried to object, but Emily was already finished. The decision, once made, felt like setting down a weight she had carried for far too long. There were no dramatic gestures, no shouting, just the quiet, irreversible shift of control. Jack did not interfere. He did not speak again. He simply remained where he was, a steady presence at Emily's side, until Linda and Ryan finally retreated back to their car. The engine started. The headlights turned away. When the car disappeared down the street, the night seemed to breathe again. Emily stood still for a long moment, her hands trembling slightly. The cake sat untouched on the table, the candle unlit. Jack waited. Eventually, Emily looked at him. She did not thank him. She did not explain herself. She didn't need to. He gave a single nod, as if acknowledging something unspoken between them. That night, Emily lay awake longer than usual. She thought about death, about loss, about how the past never truly disappears. It waits, patient, until the moment you are strong enough to face it. And for the first time since she had left her father's house, Emily understood that choosing not to be silent was not an act of rebellion. It was an act of survival. The weeks that followed did not unfold dramatically. There were no shouting matches, no courtroom scenes filled with raised voices and pointed fingers. There was no moment where Emily felt victorious or triumphant. Instead, there was paperwork, meetings, long afternoons spent listening, reading, thinking. Emily did exactly what she had promised herself she would do. She sought legal counsel. She asked questions. She took her time. Not because she wanted revenge, and not because she cared about the money, but because she refused to let the story of her life be rewritten without her consent. Justice, she learned, was rarely loud. It was careful, methodical, quiet. She learned that her father's estate had been handled carelessly, that assumptions had been made about her absence, about her silence, about her willingness to step aside and disappear once again. The same mistake they had made years ago. Only this time, Emily did not step aside. She asserted her rights calmly, firmly, without bitterness. She corrected false narratives. She refused to sign what she did not agree with. She stood her ground, not out of anger, but out of respect for the person she had become. Jack was there through it all, not beside her at the table, not speaking on her behalf, not stepping into the spotlight. He waited outside offices, sat quietly in his motorcycle when meetings ran long. Sometimes he wasn't visible at all, but Emily knew he was nearby. He did not tell her what to do. He did not offer advice unless she asked. He simply made sure that if the ground beneath her shifted, she would not fall alone. That mattered more than words ever could. Months passed. The legal matters resolved themselves one by one, explainable, orderly conclusions. Emily received what was rightfully hers, not excessive, not life-changing in a dramatic sense, but enough to acknowledge that she had existed, that she had not been erased. When it was finally over, Emily felt something she had not expected. Relief. Not because she had won anything, but because she had finished something. She closed a chapter that had remained painfully open for far too long. Life moved forward. Emily continued working. She saved. She planned. She allowed herself to imagine a future that was not shaped by loss or resentment. She was careful with her trust, but no longer afraid of connection. Jack remained as he always had. Present, steady, unobtrusive. He never claimed a place in her life. He never asked for one. Their connection existed in shared silence, in the understanding that some bonds did not need definition to be real. One morning, long after everything had settled, Emily woke with a quiet certainty. There was one last thing she needed to do. The cemetery lay just outside town, bordered by tall trees that filtered the sunlight into soft, shifting patterns. Emily walked slowly along the gravel path, a small bouquet of flowers in her hands. White lilies. Simple, unadorned. She stopped in front of her father's grave. The stone was modest, his name etched plainly, dates marking a life that had ended without resolution between them. Emily stood there for a long moment. She did not kneel. She did not cry. She did not speak. She thought of the man he had been before grief and fear had hollowed him out. She thought of the choices he had made, the moments where he had turned away instead of standing firm. She allowed herself to feel the sadness without letting it consume her. Forgiveness, she had learned, was not an announcement. It was a decision made quietly, again and again, until the weight finally lifted. Emily placed the flowers at the base of the stone. She lingered for a few seconds longer. Then she turned and walked away. No anger followed her. No longing pulled her back. Behind her, the past remained where it belonged. Jack waited by the motorcycle at the edge of the parking lot. He did not ask what she had felt. He did not ask what she had said. He watched as she approached, reading the calm in her expression, the steadiness in her stride. She nodded once. That was enough. They rode in silence, the road stretching ahead beneath open sky. The air was clear. The day was ordinary. And yet, everything felt different. Emily realized that the night she had been thrown out into the rain had not been the end of her story. It had been the beginning of her learning how to survive, not through bitterness, not through vengeance, but through resilience. She had built a life that did not depend on anyone who had once rejected her. And Jack, the man who had stopped on a dark highway and never explained why, had given her something she did not fully understand until now. He had not saved her to keep her. He had saved her so she could stand on her own. As the motorcycle carried them forward, Emily reflected on the strange truth of it all. Sometimes, the people who change our lives the most do not stay forever. They come quietly. They act when it matters. And they leave before we mistake protection for dependence. The words formed clearly in her mind, not as sadness, but as understanding. Sometimes the person who saves you isn't sent to stay forever. They're sent to teach you how to survive. Emily looked ahead, the road open and waiting. And for the first time, she knew she was ready for whatever came next.